Good evening. There we go. I'm Monty Murray. I'm president of the South Wake Conservationists. I want to welcome you here tonight. And we have this as a joint in-person talk, as well as we have a webcast tonight. So we're also broadcasting to Zoom. And the audience, I believe, is around 100 people. So in addition to the folks in the room, so we're pretty excited about that. And it's represented in 8 states, including North Carolina. So we have North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, DC, Tennessee, Pennsylvania, Colorado, and Louisiana. So folks are interested in snakes. We are the South Wake Conservationists. We are a chapter of the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. We're one of 20 chapters in the state. And our mission is to protect, conserve, and restore North Carolina wildlife and habitat. And public outreach is something that's very important to us and something it's key part of what we do. We want to enroll everybody in our conservation mission. So all of you, we really want you engaged and spread the word on why it's important. And there's many things you can do to help. I'd also like to point out that this is the 50th anniversary of the Endangered Species Act, which was signed in 1970. That's a big landmark. It's a very successful piece of legislation. It's had tremendous impact. And I believe there's 291 species that were saved from extinction so far as a result of that act, which is pretty impressive. Some of which you'll recognize: the bald eagle, the grizzly bear, the whooping crane, and a number of other species. And we're really privileged here at Bass Lake in Holly Springs to have bald eagles come here and visit regularly. We live right here on the lake and we see them quite often, which is a real privilege. When I was a kid, it was a very rare thing that anybody would ever see a bald eagle. But there's much more to do. There's been some success, but there are a number of species in North Carolina. They're both endangered and threatened today. There's 43 animals that are currently on the endangered and threatened list, including the red wolf, which we've talked about in the past. The red cockaded woodpecker, which Courtney has discussed, and we've talked about the loggerhead sea turtle, and 43 total. Also 26 flowering plants. And these are our pollinators that are so important to the insect world, which drives all the rest of the ecosystem. So there's much more work to do. So I want to encourage you to stay connected. Join us if you haven't. We have a table over here for the South Wake Conservationists. You can get on our website to learn much more. We'd encourage you to join, and we do a lot of activities that hopefully you'll want to join us. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Luke Bennett, sitting here, who is the North Carolina Wildlife Federation Conservation Coordinator, who works with us and several other chapters in this area. And he will explain the Q&A session to the folks online. And for the folks here in the room, we're going to pass a microphone around, but it will be heard by the people online as well, so everybody can hear each other. And then he'll explain that. He'll be moderating the session. And I'm also going to turn this over to John Kinsella after Luke, who is the vice president of our chapter. And John is going to introduce our speaker this evening. After the program, when the webcast ends, we're going to ask you to hit locally to please stay, because we do have some refreshments. Hopefully some people have bought some raffle tickets over here. So we have a raffle and we'll have results of that, but mainly let's just have a conversation. So thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Luke.
Hi, everybody. My name is Luke Bennett. As Monty said, I'm the conservation coordinator for the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. I'm doing what I love and I work with some great people. So it's really been a great experience so far. I'm getting on 1 year here soon at the Wildlife Federation. So just want to briefly just explain how folks online are going to ask a question. We ask that you hold your questions to the very end of the presentation, and you can either put your questions in the chat or you can type them into the Q&A. And that's about it there. We'll make sure we get to as many of those questions as possible. I know there's a lot of questions that people have about snakes, so we will try to answer as many as we can. And now I'm going to hand it over to John, who will introduce Bonnie.
I feel like Dick Clark. Thank you, and it's a real honor to introduce Bonnie, our speaker for the evening. Bonnie is also a member of, South Wake Conservationists. Bonnie is also a North Carolina certified environmental educator, and she has a degree in wildlife services from North Carolina State. So tonight she's going to talk about one of the probably one of the most controversial type of animals that we deal with. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn the program over to Bonnie.
So thank you. Hello, everybody. This is my first time doing a hybrid thing. So hello, everyone, and hello, everyone. So I'm really excited that you're here and that you're excited to learn about snakes. I am an environmental educator here in the Raleigh area. And I teach all types of topics about nature. But one of the things that people have the most questions about, and also I noticed fears about, is snakes. And I have learned that if you have a fear, sometimes it's because it's unknown or unfamiliar to you. And I have learned that if I share a little bit of information, sometimes those fears go away just a little bit. Phobias are real. So if you have a phobia, that's fine. And even a fear is fine. So I'm hoping that after today, maybe a little bit of information, maybe you'll have a better understanding of snakes and what to do if you see them. So I'm going to share my screen. See if this works. Hopefully it worked online too. All right, so I just titled this Snakes 101, and I do want to say that today I'm going to primarily focus on Wake County in North Carolina. I know we have a lot of people here from various states and maybe other counties in North Carolina. Today I'm going to primarily focus on Wake County, but it will be applicable to a lot of North Carolina region. I will also point out where there might be similarities or other things. I can really only speak to North Carolina and the Southeast, so if you're in another state somewhere, I will maybe empower you to look up your resources in your state as well. So just really quick, I always start with the basics of what a snake is. And that's because I have had people just kind of confused about what type of animal a snake is. I have had people ask me, do they have bones? Yes, they do. They are vertebrates. They are reptiles. They have a really long backbone. They're very flexible, but they do have bones. So they're basically legless reptiles. If they had hands, they'd probably have claws, just like turtles and lizards do. And a couple just kind of quick facts about them. I'm sure you've seen snake skins out and about. They do shed several times a year. It's when they grow. So every time they shed their skin, it's because they've grown a little bit. So younger snakes might shed a little bit more. It also has to do with the season. Now is the warm season, so they're eating a whole lot more, growing a whole lot more, they are shedding a whole lot more. So sometimes you find the shed around and you didn't know you had a snake in your yard, but you found its skin. And we're going to talk a little bit about snakes in your yard too, because I know some people are a little more upset or happy about having snakes in your yard too. Snakes are not slimy. Reptiles are not slimy. They do not make a slime. They have scales. So if a really any reptile, especially a snake, appears slimy, either they've been in the water and they're wet, maybe they have something that they've swam in, or maybe they're just really shiny because they've just grown their brand new scales. So they are themselves not slimy, even though they get that reputation of slimy. Snakes are always sticking their tongue out at you, and that is because they're sensing the air. This is how they sense their surroundings, how they hunt. So they're sticking that tongue out. It's kind of like tasting the air, not exactly, but they stick out their tongue and then they put it back in, and there's this thing called the Jacobson's organ, where it's kind of like tasting the air molecules. So they have a forked tongue. If there's the mouse that they're trying to hunt on this side, they're going to smell it more on this side of their tongue. Or maybe the mouse is over there. They might be able to smell it on this side. So it helps them navigate where they're going. So they're constantly sticking that tongue out. And I know that creeps some people out too. They're not hunting you. You're too big. But they are sensing their surroundings. It is how they sense their surroundings. And I'm going to come back to that. They're not hunting you. You are too big. You might think you're delicious, but a snake does not want to eat you. You are too big. So remember that, because our next slide is talking about how a snake can open their mouth really big and eat something bigger than their head. They actually kind of unhinge their jaws. They don't have hands to shove their food in their mouth. So you can see on this slide, their teeth are curved backwards. And after they capture their prey, they move their jaw back and forth. And those backwards teeth help push their food back into their mouth because they can't push it in with their hands because they don't have any. But again, even though they can do this, you're still too big for them to eat. So have no fear. They are not trying to eat you. This is going to be a theme. All right. And I bet you guys have heard this saying, the only good snake is oh, you said it. No, the only good snake is a live snake. And I know not everybody agrees with me, but the only good snake is a live snake. They're so important in our ecosystem, even the venomous ones. We're going to get to the venomous ones. But snakes directly help control the rodent populations. There are ticks and fleas on rodents, so they're not picking them off before they eat those ticks and flea or those rodents. So one timber rattlesnake, which does not live in Raleigh, but maybe some of the areas you guys visit, or maybe some of the areas you guys live. One timber rattlesnake, I found this on the internet somewhere, I think it is right, eats 3,000 or more ticks annually. They are eating a lot of rodents. If you're a farmer, if you just have a garden and you have a snake in your garden, they're eating something. They're not there eating your plants. Snakes are carnivores. Carnivores, as you know, they eat animals. So if the snakes are in your garden or in your farm, they're eating something, and that something is probably eating your plants. So mice, rats, whatever might be in there eating your plants, snakes are in there taking care of that. So that's helping your crops, also reducing the droppings, the rodent droppings in your crops as well. And venomous snakes are being researched for different things, like the venom being used in breast cancer research. So they are very, very helpful in our population, both venomous and non-venomous snakes. Now, I keep saying the word venomous, and I think some of you might have said poisonous before, but there is a difference. Does anybody here in the audience that I'm looking at right now know the difference between venom and poison? Do you know? Yes, they said poison is something you eat. So I found this cool graphic online. And yes, poison is something you ingest or maybe absorb, like poison ivy makes you really itchy. Don't go eating frogs, but there are poison dart frogs. They have some excretion on their skin that would make them poisonous. But venom has to be injected or stabbed into you. So snake bite, spider bite, bee sting, technically all venom. Technically, you could eat a rattlesnake because they are not poisonous. I never have. I am from Southern Arizona originally, and they do sometimes eat rattlesnakes there. I don't know how I never ate one growing up, but I would try it if somebody cooked it the right way. I don't know how to cook rattlesnake, but because they are not poisonous, you can technically eat them. The venom is just in their mouth. All right. So snakes that happen to have venom have these venom glands, and then they have these fangs so that they can eject the venom. The reason why snakes are venomous are not to bite people. You are too big. You are too big to eat. They don't want to bite you. The reason that they have venom is for hunting. So most snakes are ambush predators, as are a lot of other animals. Ambush predators, they usually hide, and when something comes through, they launch and they bite. Venomous snakes, they bite, they inject venom into their prey. So their prey could be like a mouse or something like that. And then they just kind of follow that animal. Now that animal has venom in it, and it's going to slow down, and it is going to eventually die. And that is very sad. And I know that. But they do kill their animals or their prey before they eat them. And this is how venomous snakes do that, is they use their venom for hunting. And you are too big to hunt. So they're not trying to eat you. They do also use it for defense. So if you are messing with a snake, you might get bitten because you've been handling it and you've been upsetting it. So it's also a really great defense. So that is how people get bitten, but they don't get bitten because they're trying to eat you. If a snake does not have venom, They are usually constrictors. So those are also ambush predators. They grab their mouse, and maybe you've seen this in person or on TV, and they immediately squeeze really, really tight, and they squeeze their prey to death. Again, that's very sad, and I know, but they do have to kill their prey before they ingest them. Prey can fight back. Prey animals do have teeth, most of them. So a mouse can fight back. It's smart for a snake to kill their prey first. But again, the venom is primarily for hunting, and for defense. So how do you tell a venomous snake from a non-venomous snake? Anybody in the audience want to give me an example? I see one. The triangle shape of the head is what was said back there. Anybody else? That's. I forgot there's another microphone.
We'll do a second mic
There you go.
if anybody wants to talk.
Go ahead.
I think the difference is their teeth.
Yeah.
If it's venomous. If they're venomous, they would have 2 long teeth. And if they weren't, they would have little tiny teeth.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else? Now, oh, Jennifer's got one way over there. She's way over there.
Their pattern?
Their pattern, yes. That is the answer I don't usually get, so good job. Oh, we got one back here.
Her eyes.
Her eyes, yes, you are correct. So I'm going to show you some of these things in the next slide. So on the top, I have a non-venomous water snake, and on the bottom, I have a venomous cottonmouth. Now, the first picture there shows the eyes, which is what you just told me. 100% right. The non-venomous snake has a round pupil. That black thing in your eye is a pupil. And then the venomous snake has kind of a cat eye. But let me ask you this. If you saw a snake right there, are you going to get real close and look into its eyes? Probably not the safest thing to do if you're trying to figure out if it's venomous, right? The triangle head is true. The venomous snakes generally do have a big triangle head, but here's a tricky thing. Sometimes when non-venomous snakes are being threatening, they will flare out their head. Now, it's probably in everybody's benefit because now you're like, whoa, it's venomous, I'm going to leave it alone, which is good for both of you. Non-venomous snakes can still bite. They just don't have the venom in their teeth. But as with any animal bite, it could hurt and it could have infection. You could get bacterial infection. So yes, that's true. If you start looking at lots of snake heads and get a good feel of what that triangle looks like, but also know that some of those snakes are going to flare out the head. One thing nobody told me is if you flip them over and look at their tail, which is not something I hope anybody would do anyways, but this is just a fun fact because it is true. If you flip them over, the vent that is listed here, and nobody's asked me yet, but snakes, they do have to poo and they pee, and some of them lay eggs. And the vent is where all of that would come out of on the bottom end of the snake. Everything past the vent is their tail. So if you were to flip over a snake and look at it, you can see on this picture that past the vent, on the non-venomous snake, there are 2 rows of scales. Past the vent on the venomous snake is 1 row of scales. Can you see that? But that's also not the greatest way to figure out if a snake is venomous, to flip it over and look at its bum. So don't do that either. But what I always tell everybody to tell a venomous snake from a non-venomous snake is what Jennifer said, look at their pattern. No matter where you live, not all the snakes are venomous. But if you learn your venomous snakes, then you can just know that the rest are not. And again, I mentioned earlier, I'm going to focus very primarily on Wake County. And in most of Wake County, our only venomous snake that you're going to see is the copperhead. We do have cottonmouths in like the far southeast corner of Wake County, and there are cottonmouths, water moccasins, same thing, in eastern North Carolina, if you're in one of the counties from there. But there are 30-something species of snake. That's a lot to learn. But if you learn your one venomous snake for Wake County, or maybe 2 or 3 in whatever county you live in, or whatever state you live in, you just learned your venomous snake, then you can just know the rest are not venomous. The rest, if you learn them, are bonus, right? That's frosting on the cake if you learn all those snakes. But it'll give you at least peace of mind to know which one your venomous snake is. So before I go into identifying some snakes, I do want to talk about why snakes bite and how snake behavior, because a lot of what goes into this is knowing snake behavior. So most snakes are camouflage, and I think everybody knows what that means, right? Uh-oh. There we go. So the first line of defense for a snake is to freeze and to hope that you don't see them. Copperheads, and I'm going to show you one in a little bit. If you don't know what they look like, we're going to learn them tonight. They're very camouflaged. They live in our forest floor where the leaves are dry, they're brown. They're very camouflaged. Now, if you are wearing camouflage, but you're running through the woods, everybody can see you, right? Camouflage only works if you're sitting really still. So first line of defense for those animals, most of those animals that are camouflage, is to freeze and hope that you walk right by them. And you might not want to hear this, but I bet you walk by a lot more copperheads than you care to think about, because their first line of defense is to freeze. Really, most any snake around here, their first line of defense is generally to freeze and hope you just walk by, and it works for them. All right, so first line of defense is actually hiding. Okay. Second line of defense. Oh no, now I've seen the snake, and the snake's like, oh no, you've seen me. My camouflage did not work. A couple of things might happen. A lot of times if you're really close, again, they're camouflaged. So sometimes they're right there by the time you see them, because they have frozen. You've kept walking and you went, whoa, they're right there. They might be close enough where they're scared enough to go and make themselves look bigger. Like I was saying with the triangular heads, some of these non-venomous snakes might just go, I'm really big. Because here's the thing, they can't eat you, but you are very big. For all they know, you might eat them. You're probably not going to, right? Hopefully not. But the snake just goes, whoa, giant. And the snake knows that you could at least hurt him if you're not trying to eat him. So their second line of defense might be lifting that head, making themselves look really big. Sometimes they might lunge out and it looks like they might be trying to bite, but it's almost like a warning, like, I will bite you. So they're acting tough, right? They're going, bite with me, I'll get you back, all right? They're hoping that you're gonna go, yes, sir, thank you, and leave, right? And most of the time that also works, because we're gonna jump back and go, whoa, don't wanna get bitten. Regardless if you know what snake it is, probably don't wanna get bitten, right? So basically the second line of defense is, don't mess with me, I will defend myself. Third line of defense, and sometimes this is the second line of defense if they have enough space, is to get away, because you're a big giant. You could hurt them, you could eat them. We're not going to, right? But they don't know that. So they are thinking, wow, big giant human is scary. I'm going to get away. So sometimes this is the second thing they do. Sometimes they flare up first, and like if you're right here, they're not going to immediately turn their back, because that would be putting them in danger, right? If they immediately turn their back and you're right there. So sometimes they kind of stand their ground for a while. But usually they do try and get away from you. Now, I have heard lots of people say, oh, snakes chase me all the time. But I challenge you, I see some head shaking. Yeah. I challenge you, think about if anybody here has perceived that they have been chased by a snake, what was the surrounding like? Where was that snake's exit? Was the only way to get away towards you? Maybe there was something else dangerous on the other side that they were already coming away from. And it's very hard to think about in that moment where you're like, whoa, snake, wasn't expecting that. Now it's over here. But when you really look at the big picture, again, you're too big. They're not trying to eat you. If they come towards you to bite you, you could just as easily hurt them back. They don't want that. So they're going to try and get away. But if the path away is towards you, you may perceive that they're chasing you. They're not. At most, they might kind of lunge forward as a warning, but again, they're not trying. Their first line of defense is not to bite you. However, if none of those other things work, they will, right? So if they can't get away, or if unfortunately, that camouflage works so well. We didn't see them and we stepped on them. Now they're pinned down. They can't get away. They have to go straight to this last defense, which would be to bite. And honestly, if somebody stepped on you and pinned you down or reached out and grabbed you, you would also fight back. You'd punch, you'd kick, you'd scream, right? They don't really scream, but you would bite if you had to, right? If you really thought that was the last resort, you would bite. And that's where they're at. So unfortunately, because they're so camouflaged, because sometimes we just step on them or reach our hand in and it shocks them, sometimes they go straight to that last line of defense because they don't have time to do the rest of that. So I point that out only because, not to scare anybody, but also because it's good to understand general snake behavior and what they're going to do, because then you can think about, when I see a snake, what am I going to do? It's kind of like planning for a fire drill in your house. If a fire happened, I think everybody here has a plan of what they would do and where they would go and how they would react, right? It's a little bit of the same, maybe not as scary and dangerous as a fire, but if you think about now, if I saw a snake, what would I do? Then when you do encounter a snake, obviously people get really scared, and sometimes our instincts make us act very crazy and do silly things that may not be as safe. But in the back of your brain, hopefully that kicks in of, wait, I know what to do. I've thought about this, and we're going to go over that as well. So what I want to do now is start talking about how to identify these snakes. The first snake I'm going to focus on is the copperhead, which again is the only venomous snake you're going to see in most of Wake County. So if you live in a county outside of Wake County or another state, in the Southeast, it's a pretty common snake. So I think almost everybody on the Zoom probably has a copperhead. I forgot all the states you said, but I think everybody has a copperhead probably. So we're going to learn the pattern of the copperhead. And the slide I'm going to show you has a couple different species on it because they all look a little bit like copperheads. But I'm going to point out the top two are copperheads. And if you look on the side of them, doesn't it look like Hershey Kisses? Can you see it? From the top down, they might look like hourglasses, but you kind of have to be right over the snake. So probably also not the best way to look at that. But from the side, Hershey Kisses, or this works too. Do you guys see poop emojis? It works, right? Do you see them? Yeah. So poop emoji, copperhead. This other one with the little green tail, that is a young copperhead, and thankfully copperheads look the same when they are babies. The green tail is used as kind of like a decoy. They'll shake it and it kind of looks like a worm, and it kind of lures their prey in. That does fade as they get older. They don't have the green tail anymore. You could see his tail on that one. He doesn't have a green tail anymore. But they do still, even as babies, poop emojis, Hershey Kisses. The snakes on the bottom, non-venomous, but they almost have the same pattern. So corn snakes, they have these circles there, but are they Hershey Kisses? Are they poop emojis? No, they are not. Can you see that from farther away than you would maybe looking into their eyes? Yeah, that's a lot safer way. Definitely safer than grabbing them and looking at the bottom of their tail. Northern water snakes also get confused for copperheads a whole lot because they also have these kind of blotchy patterns, and they can be variable and they can be darker, and their spots can look a whole lot different. But again, they're still not shaped as those line of poop emojis, right? They are definitely different. Now, if you see these snakes and you're like, whoa, I'm not sure, are you going to grab them and see? No, they can still bite. So don't grab them. But it might give you peace of mind if you can see this and go, that is not a copperhead. If nothing else, maybe that will just calm your brain down so you're not as concerned about it. So we're going to keep talking about copperheads, but I want to pause here and say, what do you do if you see a copperhead? Ooh, what do you do? Do you freak out? We probably do naturally, right? So the best thing to do once you see it is to kind of freeze, because it's already freezing usually, right? It's usually freezing. I usually have a lot of kids tell me, I would run away, which sounds great, right? But what if you went to run away and you trip and fall and now you're laying down next to a copperhead? Probably not the best thing, right? I'm clumsy. I would probably fall down. So the best thing to do is freeze, look around, make sure that you are safe, and then back away, maybe the back the way you came. If it's in the middle of the path, make sure the path maybe off the trail is clear and give it its space. Or you might just have to, well, I'll pick another trail. If you see a copperhead in your yard or at your playground, what should you do? There's some kids in the back. If you see a copperhead maybe in your yard or at your playground, wherever you're at, the best thing to do is to let the adults know. And I'm saying that for any other kids that are in our audience as well. Let an adult know and let the adults figure out what to do. So adults, I'm putting the pressure on you. Here's a couple of things you can do. Keep in mind that copperheads do not want to bite you. However, our children, may come across them and not know them. Our pets might come across them and terrorize them. Dogs do that. So if you become aware that there's a copperhead in your yard or in any place that you think people will be in danger, a lot of times, especially like out on the trail, a lot of times those copperheads are like, oh, human, and they're just going to go in the woods and they're going to go camouflage in the woods, and probably the next hiker is going to be fine. But if it's in your yard, here's a couple things you can do. You can buy long snake grabbers if you want. I have some 3-foot ones. They kind of clamp, so I'm able to grab that snake kind of behind the head. It doesn't hurt them, but it does hold on to them really well. And I put it back in the woods. My house is adjacent to woods. I will always get snakes in my yard, which is fine, but I have dogs and I don't want them to get bitten by copperheads. I put them back in the woods. You don't have to get a snake hook. If you're able to get your garden hose, you can stand really far away with your garden hose and spray a snake, any snake really. And that's a safer way to maybe shoo it on along. Just make sure that the way it needs to exit is not between you where you are. Make sure that you're kind of spraying away from the house. And that might be just enough just to make it get out of your yard. And there are also services, wildlife services, that might come and capture them for you as well. So in a safe way, just to get them out of your yard as well. But the first thing you should do is just kind of freeze, make sure that you are safe, and then make sure you have a safe route away so that you don't get bitten. Because again, if we're messing with it or anything like that, that's when you chance getting bitten. And I do mention the snake hook. You have to be very safe with that as well, because that does put you in closer proximity. Garden hose might be better because you can spray from way back here. You can also take your chances and just see if it'll kind of move out on its own. We're going to talk at the end about reasons why they might be in your yard and how you can prevent that as well. So I'm going to keep going, talking about some other snakes, other species of snakes that we might see. Now, I keep saying the only venomous snake you're going to see primarily in Wake County is that copperhead, but I don't want to leave out the cottonmouth. In parts of Wake County, primarily down Wendell, if anybody here is from Wendell or visits Wendell, there are some cottonmouths, water moccasins down in that area. If you live in eastern North Carolina, you have some, some cottonmouths. They are a little bit harder to tell. It's true, their eyes are cat eyes, but you can hardly see that in this picture. Their heads are triangle. Their pattern is varied. They can be very dark. They can be solid black. So the best thing I can tell you about cottonmouths is just to not grab any snake in the water, because all of those water snakes are very feisty and very quick to bite when you grab them. So just know that any snake in the water, not every snake in the water is a cottonmouth. A lot of people in Raleigh tell me, oh, I saw a cottonmouth in, I don't know, I'm just going to pick a lake, Shelley Lake, Bass Lake. They're not here. They're not here. You probably saw a water snake, which I also have pictured on this slide. But not every snake in the water is a cottonmouth. But in some parts of North Carolina and other states, there are cottonmouths. In general, I just wouldn't grab water snakes. Sometimes people are kayaking and you encounter these water snakes, right? And I also want to point out, once again, you are too big to eat. The snakes don't want to eat you. Sometimes we kayak in a way where we surprise the snakes, right? We're right on top of them. Sometimes they are hanging in trees, but I promise you no snake is like, all right, here comes a kayaker. No snake is doing that. They might accidentally get bumped into your boat. And if you are a kayaker in these places where you do have these snakes, think about now, what should you do if a snake falls in your boat? Well, you're going to freeze because that snake also doesn't want to be in your boat. That snake is trying to get out. And if you're both flailing about, that's an accident waiting to happen. And it's very hard to freeze, right? When a snake lands on you. I think I would flail, right? I'm not going to lie. I think my instincts would take over and go, bah. But just have the peace of mind that they are not purposely trying to get into your boat. They're not purposely trying to get on you. It's an accident, right? And so if you can just give them their space and let them be, then they will also hopefully give them your space too. It is a little bit harder when we sneak up on them because they are also like, whoa. So that does happen. So there are a couple other water snakes. There's that northern water snake again. I put it up again because they are often confused for those cottonmouths. Cottonmouths, by the way, you see they got their name because one of their things that when they are threatening, they just open their mouth and show off their teeth, basically. And you did say earlier that venomous snakes have those fangs, but hopefully you wouldn't open their mouth to see if they had fangs in there either. But they will open their mouth just kind of as a threat. Right now he's got his fangs kind of folded in, but he does open his mouth as a threat. And some other snakes may do that. That one's really known for doing that. But these other snakes on the bottom, found in the water, the two on the bottom found a whole lot in Wake County in the Raleigh area. See them all the time, not venomous, still feisty if you grab them. So don't grab them, they will bite you. By far, and I want to point out, do you see any poop emojis, any Hershey kisses on those two snakes? No. I acknowledge that cottonmouths are a little bit trickier though. By far the most common snake I see, especially in the Raleigh area, really in most of North Carolina, is the rat snake. Now they can be variable. Up in this area in Wake County, they're primarily black rat snakes. If you get farther east, they may be yellowish or greenish. I lived in Cumberland County for a while, and there's some really cool yellow snakes with a stripe down them, still a rat snake. But in Wake County, we kind of collectively call these black snakes, the rat snake, the racer, and sometimes the king snake. They're kind of collectively all called black snakes, and that's fine because sometimes it's hard to tell them apart. But do you see any poop emojis? Not venomous. These are not venomous. And again, I'm speaking mostly about Wake County, not venomous. Even this little one, the little gray and black one, that's a baby rat snake. And so this is an example of how the baby looks different than the adult. But even with its spots, no poop emojis, right? Still going to make you go, whoa. But then when you look at it, no poop emojis, no Hershey kisses. So by far, I see eastern rat snakes. They're the ones that get like 6 feet long. They'll get in your chicken coops. They can climb trees really well. But in general, they're pretty docile. They usually just kind of mosey along. They kind of take their time sometimes when you see them. Because I can identify them and I feel safe. Sometimes if I see them on the trail, I'll just go and tap their tail and they're like, ugh, and then they just go in the woods. Racers, usually their first line of defense is to run. Well, they don't have legs, but to get away, right? So they kind of skip all the hiding and everything else. When you're walking, sometimes you hear it before you ever see it. Those racers are really, really fast, and they're just getting away. Eastern king snakes are really awesome. They're called king snakes. They're like the king of the snakes. They eat other snakes, including venomous copperheads. So if you have a king snake, the difference is they have those white stripes. If you have a king snake, awesome snake to have in your yard. Really, any of these in your yard is going to be really great. It could help displace those venomous snakes. Just making sure I'm good on time. Okay. Some other snakes that I see fairly commonly in, again, the Wake County, Raleigh area. The rough green snake, I only see 1 or 2 of these a year because they live way up in the trees. They're bright green, where they're camouflage in the treetops up there. And you see this person holding it. It's a very skinny snake. It's eating bugs up there in those treetops. Usually when I see it, it's because it's crawled down and maybe is making its way to another tree. I get very excited when I see these. Now I can identify snakes. I've been trained on how to hold snakes. I will admit, every time I see a green snake within my reach, I pick it up because they are so fun. And I have never had a green snake bite me. Now, if I pick up any snake and it bites me, whose fault is it? Mine, 100%. If I've ever bitten by something I pick up, totally my fault, right? But these are pretty docile snakes. They do eat bugs. Eastern garter snake, it is garter, not garden, but they do appear in your garden. I actually have one of these in my backyard right now. It lives in my wood pile and I love it. I'm thrilled that my dogs leave it alone. They can get pretty big. They have this yellow stripe all the way down. Sometimes you can see a little bit of pattern on them. Ring snake on the bottom, that's a little snake. It doesn't get very big. It has a bright yellow necklace, very often found in your garden bed where it might be eating bugs or slugs that are eating your garden. Those are real fun. And brown snake, I'm going to say aside from the black rat snakes, brown snakes are probably the most common. I see some nodding and those are probably the most common. And these might give you a startle because they're small brown snakes and copperheads can be small brown snakes. But do you see any poop emojis? No. So when I see them, I always freeze, look at its pattern, and then go, okay, that is not a venomous snake in Wake County, right? So those are also, they don't get very big, also often in your mulch and your garden beds as well. So none of these have poop emojis at all. Some other little brown snakes. There's so many little brown snakes, but none of these have poop emojis. None of these have Hershey kisses. So while you might, again, see a little brown snake, freeze, okay, it's not the copperhead though. All of these can be, again, found in your garden bed. So high chance you're going to see these around your house because they're going to be in that mulch. They're going to be in that garden bed. They'll dig down. Again, they're eating little bugs, little slugs, maybe worms, whatever they can fit. They're really little, whatever can fit in their little mouth. Red belly water snakes. Sorry, this red belly snake. There's also a red belly water snake we saw earlier. Red belly snakes are really cool. You can't see it in that picture, but they actually have a bright red, reddish orange belly. Worm snakes, I think, are adorable. Look at their pink bellies. They're so cute. Every time I do, and again, I do pick up snakes when I can identify them, and I take full responsibility when I do this. Every time I pick up a worm snake, it immediately tries to use its nose to dig in between my fingers because it wants to get back in the ground. That is its first priority, is to get back in the ground, and it thinks my hand is the way to go. It tickles, really. Rough and smooth earth snakes look very similar. Their scales are, again, rough and smooth. You almost have to pick them up to really see that, though. And again, with any of these snakes, if you're just not sure, you don't have to pick them up. These guys right here are so beneficial in your garden beds. If you see these, just kind of let them do their thing. They're going to try and get away anyway. I would recommend, though, as you're gardening, as you're working around your home, wear gloves. Because we are often weeding and pulling, and sometimes we pull where that snake is before we saw that snake. And most of the ones that you're going to see are totally fine, and they're going to be and they're going to get away. But there is the slight possibility that you could have a baby copperhead in there, right? And if you have gloves on, if you've got long pants on, even if you come up on them and you've startled them and it startled you, you at least have a layer of protection, especially when you can't see exactly where you're putting your hands. That's definitely the smartest thing to do. All right, so I have a quiz. I don't know if I said anything about a test. I don't know if you were expecting a test, but we have a copperhead quiz. All right. I have full faith that you guys can do it. Play along at home. I think you can do it. All right. Which one of these is the copperhead? All right. Here in person, I'm hearing a lot of B. Hopefully you guys are doing that at home. B is that same picture I showed you earlier. I didn't want to trick you on the first quiz question. In fact, I think I maybe have shown you all of these pictures already. I tried to trick you with that corn snake, but you recognize that that's not the right pattern. Good job. And there's a little brown snake down there. It's not literally a brown snake. That's a red belly snake. But there's a little snake down there that is brownish, doesn't have the pattern. All right. Ready for your next quiz? Which one is the copperhead? C. Everybody in person is saying C. Awesome. I tried to trick you again with two snakes that have spots on them, but the spots are not right. They're not the right spots. Again, if they will make you hesitate, make you think about it, and then you can at least know venomous versus non-venomous. It does not matter that you know these 3 snakes, but right now, today, you can tell me those 3 in Wake County are not venomous. You have that peace of mind already. All right. And again, even if they're not venomous, don't grab them. All right. How about this one? Does that work? No. That one. Ooh. I tried to trick you with a farther picture. All the photos that I'm using today are primarily off of herpsofnc.com, and that's a really great resource website. But this picture here of this copperhead is my picture. I saw the snake at a park. And what did it do? It looked at us for a while and then it slithered. Do you see it slithering away from me? That's what that's exactly what it's doing. I didn't run no, it was like, nope. And it was going away from us after it froze for a bit. And then it was like, okay, well, you're not gonna, I can tell you're not gonna harm me. And it just kind of slowly went the other way. So yes, all the other ones, doesn't matter that you remember what they are. Don't grab them. No, they're not venomous. It'll give you some peace of mind. If you do get bitten, unfortunately, by a copperhead, it does happen, right? If you are unfortunate enough to get bitten by a copperhead, probably what has happened, either they've used their camouflage, we've stepped on them, now they're pinned down, they have no choice to bite you. A lot of people are bitten on either the ankle or in the hands because either we've stepped on them or we've reached into where they were and we didn't see each other and they went straight to that defense of biting. Now I've never been bitten by a copperhead and I hope to never. However, nobody's died from a copperhead bite in decades because we have medical intervention. So the best thing to do is if you are bitten by a copperhead is to go to the hospital and let them know you got bitten by a copperhead. You do not have to catch the copperhead. I've heard that before. The medical staff will be very angry if you bring in a copperhead. Dead or alive, they are not going to want to see it. Also, if you've already been bitten and you're trying to catch the copperhead, you're going to chance getting bitten again. If your friend has gotten bitten, you don't need to catch the copperhead because you don't both need to be bitten, right? If you can get a picture, you can safely get a picture, hopefully, even from far away. You can take a picture and then zoom in later, right? But chances are, if you have been bitten by a venomous snake and you go presenting a bite from a venomous snake, the medical staff can handle it, right? The venomous snakes have those fangs. Non-venomous snakes don't have those fangs. So the bites are going to look different and the way your body is going to react is going to look different. I would definitely, if you know it's a copperhead for sure, I would definitely just kind of go. Everybody's body works and reacts a little bit differently. Some people might be fine for an hour. Some people might have, maybe something wrong with your heart or the venom might go through your body faster. You never know. So just go to the adults. I recommend having somebody drive you. I don't think it's, if you have somebody who can drive you, I don't think you need to call an ambulance if you have somebody to drive you. If you don't, maybe call an ambulance. Because again, I don't know how fast the venom is going to work in your personal body. But definitely get medical intervention. If you get bitten by a non-venomous snake, you don't have to run to the hospital, but do wash it. Just like if your cat or your dog or anything else bit you, wash it. Keep an eye on it, right? And if you see signs of infection, then go to your doctor and just explain what happened. But the best way to not get bitten is to not grab snakes, right? And to protect yourself. If you know you're going to be doing yard work, if you know you're going to be moving around in that wood pile, if you know you're going to be hiking through the woods, wear proper protection, whether that's gloves, long pants, don't wear flip-flops, that kind of stuff. And I would also say, keep in mind, copperheads will come out at night. So I don't know if anybody walks around their neighborhood or anything at night. Those copperheads do come out at night and they're harder to see because it's dark and they're camouflage. So if you're one of those ones that like to walk around your neighborhood in the dark, put on those tennis shoes. Don't wear flip-flops. And that'll help you too, just in case we accidentally get really close to them, because most of the time it is an accident. Now, I know you guys all want to attract snakes to your yard, and that's why you're here tonight, right? So, humor me for a minute. If you do want to attract any snake to your yard, here's some things you can do. You can provide shelter like sticks, long vegetation. Here's your excuse to not mow your whole lawn. If you want to encourage snakes there, avoid using chemicals. I'm going to say that in general because there's a lot of other repercussions. There are no chemicals that are going to work directly on snakes, but if you're spraying for bugs, there are things that eat the bugs, and then snakes might eat those things. Bioaccumulation, if you remember that from biology class, that can happen. So in general, I just say if you don't have to use a chemical, don't. I do understand that sometimes we just have to. Provide water resources. There are definitely those water snakes specialize in eating frogs. So if you have a pond and you have frogs, you might get water snakes in there or other things. Other snakes will eat frogs too. And in general, if you do let your lawn grow pretty tall, it'd be a good idea to put on long pants and sturdy shoes and kind of walk around before you mow. And that might be enough to just kind of chase them out of the area before you go through with a lawnmower, so that hopefully you don't mow them. So probably nobody here is really super eager to attract all the snakes to your yard, right? Because we do have children, we do have pets, and we also don't want to get bitten ourselves. So that's fair. So here's some things you can do to discourage. Now, no matter where you live, you probably have snakes in your neighborhood, adjacent to the woods. You're never going to get rid of all the snakes. But here's where you can try and discourage them, is don't keep a debris pile. So if you're cleaning up your yard after a storm, you want to pile up some sticks, don't keep those sticks. That's great snake habitat, because it's not just snake habitat. Mice will get in there, birds will take refuge in there, rabbits, and snakes eat all those things. So it's not just habitat for the snakes, it's habitat for their food. If you want to keep a debris pile, put it in the back part of your yard. Wood piles, if you have a fireplace or anything like that, don't put your wood pile right by your house, because you're going to invite those snakes to be right outside your back door. So if you do have a wood pile, just kind of put it farther away from the house. And anytime you're working in it, make sure you're wearing your gloves and your shoes, just as a safety. And if you don't want snakes in your grass, you got to keep mowing the lawn. I'm sorry. More chores, I guess. But if you don't have tall grass to hide in, you're not going to have snakes hiding in the grass generally. Remove the water resources. If you don't want water snakes eating your frogs, well, you might not be able to have frogs. If you provide food, they will come. And this is one thing that surprises a lot of people, is removing your bird feeder. So if you have a bird feeder, you know that seeds fall out. And then, I don't know, maybe you have seen rodents come to it, or definitely birds on the ground, right? That's snake food. So if you really don't want the snakes in your yard and you have a bird feeder, you might want to consider, is that why they're in my yard? You could do all these things and still have snakes in your yard. I'm adjacent to woods, I'm going to have snakes in my yard. So just kind of, if you do some of these things, sometimes that discourages it, but just kind of be aware, the animals were here first. We're living in their environment. They didn't build the houses there. But chances are, if you do some of these things to discourage them, they might pass through your yard just to say, hey, what's going on? But if they're hanging out, figure out why. If you have, they call them water bugs, if you have those on your back porch, there might be snakes eating those, the roaches, right? They might be eating those. If you have a whole lot of slugs or something like that, they might be eating those. So figure out what is keeping the snake there. It's not because he wants to be friends. He's not trying to stalk you, right? You're too big to eat. But trying to figure out, why is he there, and eliminate that. I know there's things on the market about snake away and everything. Now, eliminate their habitat and what they eat, and you will discourage them. I will never say you can eliminate them, because they're here. So those are just some things that you can do. And I do want to leave with some resources. If you want to look up some more, Reptiles and Amphibians of North Carolina, or herpsofnc.org. I think I said .com earlier. Herpsofnc.org is where I got most of these photos. It's an excellent resource. Herpetology is the study of reptiles and amphibians. So that's where the word herps comes from. When you go to that website, it'll have across the top snakes, turtles, lizards, frogs and toads, salamanders, I think alligators, I don't And you can click on that and all the species that are in North Carolina will appear. So if you have a cool picture of a snake that or a frog or turtle that you're trying to identify, you can go to that website and look it up. And the great thing about that website is it's focused in North Carolina. I apologize to those of you who are not, but hopefully there's a resource in your state. And you can find the snake. It's got pictures. You can find the snake that you think was in your yard, and it has a map of the counties. So if you think you saw a coral snake in Raleigh and you find coral snakes are red and black, that red touch yellow kill fellow, those are the coral snakes. They do live in North Carolina, but not in Raleigh. You will see on that website Wake County is not shaded in as one of theirs. So if you saw a red and black snake, maybe it's somebody's pet that's gotten out. And that's a whole other issue, right? So that's a really great resource. It's also great to learn your other animals like amphibians. It's got frog calls. So if you think you hear a frog, there's less frogs. You can play through all of the frog calls and try and narrow down what frog you have. Partners of Amphibians and Reptiles Conservation, or PARC. If you want to learn more about making your yard wildlife friendly, they've got some really great resources, because I know you all want to encourage snakes to your yard, right? So I left that up there. Another way to help identify your animal, your snakes, or really anything, iNaturalist or Seek, they're partner apps. You can upload your photo to iNaturalist. It will suggest an identification, and other users can get on there and help you confirm whether or not that is actually what it is. Seek is kind of like a hover over the image, but you can upload your image from Seek to iNaturalist. Those are both apps. It's also, iNaturalist is also web. And then when you upload it, you can georeference it. For example, my yard in Nightdale, this is where I saw it. I can put Nightdale, and now I've mapped it, and that can actually help scientists learn more about our environment. So you can upload plants, animals, bugs. I like to track migrations on there. So the first time I see a monarch, I try and put it on a naturalist. And now I have my own personal record of every year when the monarchs come by. Every year I have my own personal record of the first snake I see of the year. So you can do a whole lot with that. And finally, if you're just not sure, you don't want to use any of those, the Museum of Natural Sciences in Raleigh is also a really great resource. They actually do have Ask a Naturalist. It is on their website. You can send them a picture of about anything, and they have staff and a wide staff of the whole museum that they can send your question, your photo to, and help you identify stuff as well. So that is all of my slides, but I will take questions. So I don't know.
Yeah, I can go ahead and start off with some questions here, if you don't mind. Jeff from Carolina Beach has a question. It seems like it's an ID question. He's located in Carolina Beach, a block from the ocean. Jeff often sees a small 1 to 2 feet snake in the garden. The back is a uniform tan color, and he's wondering what kind of snake that is, if you happen to know. That's a tough question.
That is a tough question. Just the back?
Uniform, yeah, just the back has a uniform tan color.
I would encourage you to go to herpsofnc.org and see if you can see the picture of your snake, because I did focus on Wake County snakes, but since you're in Carolina Beach, your snakes are also going to be on there. And you'll see there's a bunch of brown snakes on there. So I can't say off of that description exactly what it was. I do apologize, but you have a resource now to help you look it up, especially if you've got a picture of it.
I have another question, Bonnie. So with copperheads, like a juvenile copperhead compared to an adult copperhead, does the juvenile have more venom or not? Or is it more toxic? Maybe?
That is an excellent question that I get a whole lot. So it's not that they have more venom. I've also heard that they can't control their venom. They're smaller. They can't physically have more venom, right? But I will say this, remember snake behavior, and they're only going to use their venom to hunt and to defend themselves. When you're little, you're more bite size, right? More things can eat you. You might be quicker to use your venom. Copperheads, they can give what's a dry bite, which means they lunge out, they might bite, but they might not actually expose their fangs and actually inject venom. Because again, they don't want to waste it on you unless they have to. So sometimes, and I think that's where some of the rumor comes around, or the myth comes around, is sometimes, the copperhead will lunge out and bite, but not inject its venom, whereas the baby maybe always will do that. So you just think about snake behavior, why they are doing that, why they have that behavior. that baby copperhead knows that it is more bite-sized. And so it might be quicker to use that venom, but not necessarily because they have more or that they can't control it. So maybe adults have more restraint in that, but I wouldn't say that baby snakes are like, I can't control this. So think of it that way. They have maybe less restraint, but they can still control it.
I have one more question here. So Bonnie, how is your time as an environmental educator? How has that, I guess, transformed the way you see both snakes and just animals in general? How has that transformed the way you see them in the wild?
That's a really good, and I can answer that for a lot of animals. Being out in nature, I'm out in nature a lot. I am an environmental educator. I take kids and families into the woods a whole lot. And I spend almost all of my free time, if the weather is decent, out in the woods by myself. I have an understanding of animal behavior, and I've talked a lot. I mean, obviously this presentation about snakes, but all animals have a behavior on how they're going to react when they are feeling threatened. A lot of animals are going to freeze first, get away second. But if you're really in their bubble, you're really in their zone, they will attack. And yes, some animals are going to be more willing to attack, but just having an understanding and observing what these animals do when I see them on the trail and what they do, and we both freeze and we look at each other and those animals run away. It's really telling. And I think the more I'm in nature, the more I see that happening, with the exception of like mosquitoes and stuff, but most of those things, they are afraid of us. And I know that's a saying, oh, they're more afraid of you than you are of them. But really, it's true. Unless they've been habituated to coming up to people, they are still wild and you are still perceived as a danger to them. So I would say the more I've been an environmental educator and gone hiking on my own, the more comfortable I am with animals. And I do repeat that if I'm in nature and I pick something up, or I'm in something's habitat and something happens to me, well, I'm in their habitat, right? And they are only acting on their own instincts. And I would never blame the animal for that. Did that answer it? I don't know. I think I went on a tangent.
In the room?
Have there been any studies in terms of the impact of all this development on the snake populations?
Yes, I don't know the results of those studies, and they're ongoing because urbanization is happening. But there are a lot of studies on a lot of different species. I can speak, for example, I'm involved with a box turtle study where we're citizen science collecting data on box turtles, trying to figure out the impacts of urbanization in their habitats. And that's a very long-term study. So I only bring that up just because there's researchers and biologists in every field of study who are absolutely researching bird migrations and population count and everything. And I mentioned iNaturalists earlier, that's a way that citizens can get involved in what you are observing as well. So I don't know the results of any of those. Surely those are still ongoing. But yes, the research is being done.
Is it true that you can use mothballs to keep snakes out of your garden?
You can try. If the mothballs deter something else, if the other animals or the bugs or anything like that don't like the mothballs, then get rid of their food, then the snakes won't come. But I have not heard anybody say that mothballs actually work on the snakes themselves, I should say, on the snakes themselves. On the other things that the snakes are after, maybe. But I've never heard, and that's, there's chemicals and stuff. To my knowledge, it doesn't work directly on the snakes, but it might work on their food.
Is there anything in particular that copperheads eat?
Just about anything.
Oh.
I'm going to say primarily rodents is what copperheads eat, is primarily and small mammals. I shouldn't just say rodents. There are a lot of small mammals that are not rodents. Copperheads generally stay on the ground, so usually the things that can be found on the ground, but that's not to rule out they could eat a bird, they could eat a frog, that kind of stuff. Other snakes might climb more readily, and those snakes might be more eager to eat birds and that kind of stuff, but primarily small mammals.
If you're walking on a trail and you get by a copperhead, say the person behind you, can that copperhead bite the second person, and will the venom still be reestablished enough to harm that second person?
It depends on how much venom they have, but they don't release all of their venom with every bite. So it's variable. I mean, they could have just eaten or, so I'm going to say, yes, there is a chance that they could still have venom. Not that they would definitely, or that it would definitely release their venom, but there is a chance that they could still have venom, especially the older copperheads, because they don't always release that venom right away in a bite.
Do you have any snakes?
My husband won't let me keep a snake. I wish I had a snake, but in my job as an environmental educator, I've been lucky enough to work with snakes that are used to people. They've always been living with humans. And so I have been very lucky that I have been able to take care of snakes. So I do have a snake where I work, where I have two snakes actually where I work, where I get to hold them and take care of them every day, but my husband would never. So.
So kind of related to his question, how often are snakes refilling are they continuously creating venom, or do they drain it and then do they have to wait a period before it refills their glands, or how's that work?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer 100%. I imagine I imagine they don't go on empty and then restock. I don't know 100% though, but that is what I'm guessing, is that as they use it, they probably make more. That's not the right words, but yeah.
Can snakes eat things bigger than their body?
Ooh, not bigger than their whole body, but they can eat things bigger than their head. So a baby snake is never going to eat a really big rabbit, but they might eat a bug that's bigger than their head. So a little bit bigger than just their head, because they also have to swallow it too, right? It has to fit in their whole body. And I don't know if you've seen pictures or videos after snakes have eaten, sometimes they have this big lump that goes down their body. So it does make them stretch out a little bit, and it looks like a little bit bigger than their body, but as they digest it, they bring it all down, but it has to fit in their mouth. What?
The king snake?
The king snake still only has so big of a body and so big of a mouth. So king snakes are immune to the venom though, so they can eat copperheads, but unlikely a copperhead bigger than the king snake itself, because where is it going to put it? So.
Contorting their body while they
Right.
ingest. So they are known to consume snakes roughly the same size.
Roughly the same size, but not bigger. Yeah. Usually, I mean, in general.
Challenge up.
If they're really hungry and the opportunity presents itself, I can't imagine that's comfortable though. I can't imagine that's their first choice, right? To eat something that big. So, yeah, in general. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is how long can snakes go without eating? I know like in a lot of zoos, they only feed them like once every 2 weeks or once a month. And then the second question is, are the coral snakes, since you made reference to coral snakes, are they the exception to the rule in terms of having a triangular head?
Great questions. So snakes do go through, not all snakes go through a hibernation, but a lot of snakes go through a hibernation type pattern where they will stop eating. In warmer climates, especially in the South, they might come out on a warm winter day. They may or may not eat. I didn't mention it earlier, but they're ectothermic or cold-blooded. And so they do need heat to be able to eat and digest. Their metabolism doesn't work unless they're warm. So they can go multiple months without eating. In fact, the snake that I care for just went 2 months without eating. He lives inside. We have offered food, but he knew it was winter. Or actually, no, let me take that back. He knew it was springtime and he had other things on his mind. He was not concerned about food, but he was very active and hoping that he would get a girlfriend. So they do go through phases where they don't eat just on the natural basis. even if an opportunity presents itself. And then of course, a lot of them will not eat over the winter just because it's too cold, but their metabolism slows down so much that they have enough energy just to kind of get through the winter and then pick back up. And I apologize, what was your second question? Oh, the coral snake in its head. So yeah, that one is one that doesn't have that very distinct triangular head. And I didn't really mention the coral snake a whole lot, but that's another case of knowing its pattern. Red, touch yellow, kill a fellow, go to the hospital, right? Red touch black, friend of Jack. There are milk snakes that have that red and black and that yellow, but it's where the colors touch. But even those red milk snakes, that's really good deterrent, right? Because if you see a red and yellow snake, you're going to go like, I'm not touching that. So that's a really great defense on their part as well. But you're right, they don't have the triangular head, not like that rattlesnake I showed earlier. Yeah.
Got a question online here from Marilyn. Marilyn is a rehabber, and she is wondering if snakes, I guess copperheads, would harm a newborn fawn that's about 2 to 3 pounds. She's wondering if she needs to secure her pen she has for the fawn.
I am going to guess that a fawn is way too big. However, I imagine if that fawn walks on the snake, otherwise threatens the snake, that it could defend itself. But I can't imagine even an adult copperhead being big enough to eat a fawn. Fawns are still pretty big compared to so I probably would still try to keep them separate, just because if you're a rehabber and you're going and, tending the fawn, probably don't want to encounter that snake either.
And so this question is from Andrew. Andrew's wondering, how would you respond to a neighbor who does like snakes in your yard? So maybe we can kind of piece that into 2 questions. How would you respond to a neighbor who likes snakes in their yard, and maybe you don't like snakes, and then flip it around, something like that? But
I am that neighbor that likes snakes in my yard. And if you are the neighbor that likes snakes in your yard, let your neighbors know. Because I have told my neighbors, hey, if you see a snake, let me know. I'll come help you. I'm happy for them to come, and no matter what it is, either I can help remove it or help educate. Right. And I am very lucky that my neighbors are like, oh, I love my snakes. We have a black snake. And I'm like, great. If you have a neighbor that doesn't like snakes and you're comfortable, be that neighbor to support them. And sometimes it's just peace of mind. Maybe share some of these tips today about, venomous versus non-venomous, because sometimes that peace of mind is all they really need to know. Sometimes they see a snake and a lot of people just assume all of them are venomous, kill them all, right? But we just learned a whole lot of them are not venomous. And even the venomous snakes, they can be dealt with without having to kill them. So I would just say education, just providing resources and just being understanding, because not everybody likes snakes. Some people have a phobia. And I do acknowledge that some people will see venomous snakes in their yard. You have kids, you have pets, and they do get killed for the sake of safety. I don't advocate for that, just because snakes are good for the environment. And also, if you're putting yourself in close enough proximity to kill the snake, you're putting yourself in danger. However, I do understand that sometimes in your situation, that is what you need to do. And, every situation is a little bit different. So I would say just be supportive of the neighbor or seek some resources.
I heard somewhere that copperheads are territorial, that once they establish a home, they never leave. Is that true?
I have heard that too. And especially some of them come back. If you've got really great habitat for them to be in, they want to come back and be in your really great habitat. And really, it's kind of true for almost any animal, right? You get, squirrels in your attic, you've got a really great place for them to be. And so that goes back to, why are they in your yard? What can you do in your yard to deter them from having that territorial? They're territorial because either there's shelter they don't want to give up, or there's a really great food source that they don't want any, they've had it, they have it made. So if you get rid of those items, then they're not going to be as territorial, because what's there for them? Just space. They're not going to care if they don't have food or a place to stay. So, which can be tricky, because if they're in your crawl space or anything, it's very tricky, or under your deck, it's very tricky, because that's a great space for them to shelter. So then you have to look about, okay, what are they eating? And if you're adjacent to woods like I am, maybe my yard is where they live and they go in the woods to eat, and that's made for them. So you just have to really kind of look at your yard and figure out what is in your power to do to eliminate those resources or make it harder for them.
Bonnie, what makes a legless lizard not a snake?
Oh, I love this question. So I didn't mention it earlier, but snakes can't blink. If you had a staring contest with a snake, you will never win. They actually have a scale over their eye. Lizards can blink. So if you ever see, there are legless lizards. They do live in North Carolina. I don't remember their exact range. They're also called glass lizards. They can blink. Also, legless lizards, they have ear holes. So they don't have the sticky out part of their ear, but they do have ear holes. Snakes do not have holes where their ears would be, but lizards do. And if you think about any lizard that you've seen, if you go back and look at pictures or next time you see a lizard, they've got a little hole right there for the ear. So legless lizards can blink and they have ear holes. Legless lizards can also detach their tail, just like some of the other lizards you've seen, which is very sad. I've seen it happen once. Snakes cannot detach their tail. That is also not the best way to tell the difference between a snake and a legless lizard, is to frighten them enough to detach their tail. But if it blinks at you, or if you can see ear holes, and those are both things that you can see from far enough away, especially if you take a picture and zoom in, that's the way you can tell the difference between the two.
What are the mating patterns of most snakes, especially in view of the 3 snakes that I saw last week?
So he saw some red belly water snakes last week. Most snakes are breeding in the spring. And so April, May, June, they're very active. You were talking about territory earlier. I have seen northern water snakes, the females on the edge of a pond, just like, nope, this is my territory. And, I try to shoo them away because I've had, kids about to come pond dip at the pond, and they will hold their territory. So most of the time it is during the spring. They can mate throughout the warmer months. And I cannot list all of them, but some of them lay eggs and some of them are live bearers as well. I can never remember which is which, but you can look that up for fun.
How is the breakdown in terms of male and female?
I imagine that would depend on the species, and I am not sure exactly how that breakdown would be. Every time I teach, people ask me something I don't know that I'm totally going to Google later. So thank you for that.
I got time for one last question. Already important.
So I read in a local news article last year that Wake County is the highest county for copperhead bites in North Carolina. And then I recently heard that we're also one of the top counties in the country. Do you think that's just related to population density and our development increasing in relation to woods in the state?
That would be my guess. I don't know if that statistic came from a researcher or a news person, and maybe a combination of both, right? But yes, we have a lot of neighborhoods and our habitat is dwindling for everything, right? And so when we push them out of their habitat, well, our yards become their habitat. And there are some things that can just go, well, I guess I'm staying in the woods. And there are a lot of things that just disappear. Snakes are versatile. We have things in our yard they can eat. We have things in their yard that they can hide in. So if they can live in our yards, they're going to be there in our neighborhoods, and then we're going to encounter them more than some other animals that might just leave or die off, unfortunately. So I would agree with you. I think it's more because of how many people we have and the amount of habitat they have left. There's a lot of overlap there.
So I think we've had a very full evening. Bonnie, I can say that you have made snakes fun.
Yes.
I think everybody enjoyed it. I think so. Let's give it up for Bonnie. We're also very proud to have you as a member of the Southway Conservationists. Bonnie has done a lot for our organization in addition to this talk. She leads programs for children on a regular basis, and she's done several things with our Ego Kids program. One was a moth night, which I know was a big hit. The kids really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that. And then we did another one for animal tracks, and we went down the trail and found all kinds of tracks, and that was a lot of fun too. So thanks for all your contributions. Yeah, I appreciate it. So I just want to let you know that we do hold these quarterly, these in-person jointly with a webcast meetings. The next one is September 7th, and it's going to feature Jerry Reynolds, who's from the North Carolina Museum of Natural History. And he will be talking about backyard habitats, which will be of interest, hopefully, to most people here. So be sure to come back for that and tune in for that. We also have webinars in between these meetings, which John coordinates. So keep your eye on the website for that. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, and also thank all the folks who tuned into the webinar this evening. This ends the webinar. So